Clara Whitmore pressed her bleeding hands against the frozen ground and whispered the only prayer she had left. "Please, not like this." 3 silver coins. That's all she had when the stagecoach crashed. 3 silver coins and a dead driver beside her in the snow. She was 26 years old, and everyone she'd ever loved was gone. But somewhere through the blizzard, a light flickered, and a man's voice called out words that would change everything. "I need a mother for my sons, and you need shelter." This is her story. If you want to follow Clara's journey to the very end, subscribe to our channel now and comment which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels together. The stagecoach wheel hit something hard beneath the snow, and Clara Whitmore felt the world turn upside down. She grabbed the seat. Her fingers slipped. The wooden frame screamed as it tore apart, and then she was falling, tumbling through cold air and splintering wood until her back slammed against frozen earth. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the gray sky spinning above her while snowflakes landed on her face like tiny frozen kisses. Miss you alive." Old Pete's voice. The driver. Clara tried to answer, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. She heard him crawling toward her, heard his labored breathing and the wet cough that followed. When she finally managed to turn her head, she saw him lying 3 feet away, his leg twisted at an angle that made her stomach lurch. "Pete!" Her voice came out as a croak. "Your leg." "Ain't nothing." He coughed again, and this time dark blood appeared on his lips. "Internal. Got thrown against the brake lever." Clara forced herself to sit up. Her medical training kicked in despite the dizziness, despite the cold already seeping through her thin coat. She crawled to him, her hands sinking into snow up to her wrists. "Let me see." "Miss Whitmore." Pete grabbed her arm with surprising strength. His eyes were clear, too clear for a dying man. "Listen to me. There's a ranch about 2 miles north. Big spread, can't miss it. The McAllister place. We need to stop the bleeding first. Ain't no stopping what's already done." Pete's grip tightened. "I drove this route for 15 years. I know when a man's finished. You go north, find that ranch. Jacob McAllister's a hard man, but he's fair. He'll help you." "I'm not leaving you here. You stay, we both die." Pete's voice softened. "I got a daughter in San Antonio. Name's Mary. If you make it, tell her I thought of her at the end. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't a better father." Clara felt tears freezing on her cheeks. "Pete, go girl, while you still got light." She stayed with him for another hour, holding his hand, while the snow fell harder and his breathing grew shallow. When he finally went still, Clara closed his eyes and whispered a prayer she wasn't sure she believed anymore. Then she stood up, gathered the 3 silver coins that had scattered from her purse, and started walking north. The cold was a living thing. It crawled under her clothes, wrapped around her bones, whispered terrible truths in her ear. "You're going to die out here. Just like Mama. Just like Papa. Just like everyone." Clara kept walking, one foot in front of the other. The wind screamed across the Texas plains, driving snow into her face until she could barely see 10 feet ahead. She thought about the life she'd left behind. Memphis, the hospital where she'd trained as a nurse, the patients she'd cared for, the doctors who'd praised her steady hands and calm demeanor. She thought about Robert. Handsome, educated Robert, who'd promised to marry her as soon as he finished his medical training. Who'd looked at her with such disappointment when he learned her family's farm had been sold for debts. "I'm sorry, Clara. A man in my position needs a wife with resources. Surely you understand." She'd understood perfectly. She understood that love was a luxury poor women couldn't afford. She understood that promises meant nothing when money ran out. And now here she was, alone in a blizzard, walking toward a ranch she might never reach, carrying everything she owned in a carpet bag she'd managed to salvage from the wreckage. Her feet stopped. Clara looked down, confused. She'd told her feet to keep moving, but they refused to obey. The cold had seeped so deep that her legs felt like wooden posts, numb and heavy. This is it, she thought. This is where I die. She sank to her knees. The snow embraced her like a cold lover pulling her down, promising rest. Just close your eyes. It'll be peaceful. No more hunger. No more cold. No more rejection. Clara closed her eyes, and then she heard it. A dog barking. Men's voices shouting. "Over here, Will, I found someone!" Hands grabbed her shoulders. A face appeared above her, blurry and indistinct. Dark hair, blue eyes. A jaw clenched tight against the cold. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Clara tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't move. "She's near frozen. Help me get her on the horse." Strong arms lifted her. Warmth pressed against her back as someone pulled her onto a saddle. She felt a coat wrap around her shoulders, smelled leather and wood smoke, and something else, something safe. "Hold on, ma'am, we're almost home." Home. Clara hadn't had a home in 2 years. The word sounded foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. She pressed her face against the stranger's chest and let the darkness take her. Clara woke to warmth. Real warmth, the kind that came from fires and blankets and solid walls keeping out the wind. She lay still for a moment, afraid to open her eyes. Afraid this was a dream that would shatter the moment she looked. "I think she's waking up Papa." A child's voice. Young, maybe 5 or 6. "Give her space, Maddie. She's been through a lot." A man's voice. Deep, steady, with a hint of Texas drawl. Clara opened her eyes. She was lying on a sofa in a large room. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. 2 faces peered down at her, a small boy with messy brown hair and wide blue eyes, and an older boy, maybe 9, with a guarded expression that seemed too mature for his age. "She's awake, Papa." The younger boy bounced with excitement. "Her eyes are open." "Are you a ghost, lady? Will said you looked like a ghost when they found you." "Maddie." The older boy grabbed his brother's arm. "Pa said to give her space." Clara tried to sit up. Her head swam and she fell back against the cushions. "Easy, ma'am." A man stepped into her field of vision. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and eyes the color of winter sky. His face was weathered by sun and wind, handsome in a rough way, with lines around his mouth that suggested he didn't smile often. "You were half frozen when we found you. Doc Perkins came by, said you need rest." "The stagecoach." Clara's voice came out as a whisper. "The driver. We found him." The man's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." Pete. Poor old Pete, who'd spent his last breaths telling her how to survive. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help anything. "Thank you." She forced the words out. "For saving me. I'll leave as soon as I'm able." "Leave." The man frowned. "Ma'am, there's a blizzard out there that won't let up for days. Roads are impassable. You're not going anywhere. I can't impose." "It ain't imposing when someone saves your life." The older boy spoke up, his voice flat. "That's just common sense." "Ben." The man's tone held a warning. Clara looked between them, trying to read the dynamic she'd stumbled into. The man carried authority easily, like a coat he'd worn so long it had become part of him. The older boy, Ben, watched her with suspicion, as if she were a stray dog that might bite. And the younger one, Maddie, still bounced on his toes, apparently delighted by this unexpected visitor. "I'm Jacob McAllister," the man said. "These are my sons, Benjamin and Matthew. You're at the Rockingham Ranch." Clara Whitmore. She managed to push herself into a sitting position. "I was heading to California. There's a hospital in Sacramento that's looking for nurses." "You're a nurse?" Something flickered in Jacob's eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. "I trained at the Memphis General Hospital for 3 years. I'm not a full nurse yet. The hospital closed before I could complete my certification, but I know medicine." "A nurse." Jacob repeated the word like he was tasting it. "Boys, go help Ezra with supper." "But Papa..." Maddie protested. "Now, Matthew!" Ben grabbed his brother's hand and pulled him toward the door. As they left, Clara caught the older boy glancing back at her, his expression still wary. When they were alone, Jacob pulled a chair close to the sofa and sat down. Up close, Clara could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of responsibility that pressed down on his shoulders. "Miss Whitmore, I'm going to be direct with you. Please. I've been running this ranch alone for 3 years since my wife passed. I've got 200 head of cattle, 6 ranch hands, and 2 boys who need more attention than I can give them, while keeping this place from falling apart." Clara waited, unsure where this was going. "I need help. Not just hired help. Anyone can muck stalls and mend fences. I need someone to manage the house, someone to teach my boys their letters, someone to—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Someone to be here, present, the way a woman is present. Mr. McAllister, I appreciate your situation, but I'm asking you to marry me." Clara stared at him. The words made no sense. She'd been unconscious in his house for she didn't even know how long, and this man was proposing marriage. "I'm sorry. Not a real marriage. Not in that way." Jacob's face reddened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "A business arrangement. You need shelter, security, a place to belong. I need someone to run this household and care for my children. We could help each other. You don't know anything about me. I know you walked 2 miles through a blizzard rather than lie down and die. I know you stayed with Pete Wilson until his last breath, even though leaving sooner might have saved your strength. And I know you're educated, capable, and alone in the world." Clara felt exposed, as if he'd stripped away her defenses with a few simple observations. "How do you know I'm alone?" "Because a woman with family doesn't end up on a stagecoach to California in the middle of winter with nothing but a carpet bag and $3 silver. She couldn't argue with that. "Mr. McAllister, I appreciate the offer, truly. But marriage, even a business arrangement, isn't something to enter into lightly. I've known you for less than an hour. I ain't asking for an answer tonight." Jacob leaned back in his chair. "Storm won't break for at least 3 days, probably longer. That's 3 days for you to see what life here is like. 3 days to decide if this is something you could do. And if I say no, then I'll give you money for passage to California when the road's clear, and you'll never have to see me or this ranch again." It was a fair offer. More than fair. Clara looked around the room at the sturdy walls, the crackling fire, the evidence of a life that was hard but stable. She thought of the long road to California, the uncertainty waiting at the end of it, the endless struggle of a woman alone in a world that had little use for unmarried females without family or fortune. 3 days, she said slowly. 3 days. And separate rooms. Separate. Lives in many ways. You'd have your own room, your own space. What we build beyond that would be up to us both. Jacob stood up. "I won't lie to you, Miss Whitmore. This ain't a love match. My wife, Hannah, was everything good in this world, and when she died, that part of me died with her. I'm offering partnership, not romance." "I understand. Do you—" Clara met his gaze directly. "I was engaged once, to a man who swore he loved me more than life itself. When my family lost everything, he couldn't get away from me fast enough. So yes, Mr. McAllister, I understand exactly what you're offering. And I understand its value." Something shifted in Jacob's expression. Not pity, Clara would have rejected pity instantly, but recognition. The acknowledgement of one wounded person to another. 3 days then. Supper's in an hour. Ezra will show you to a room where you can rest and clean up. He moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Whitmore." "Yes. I'm glad you didn't die in that snow." He left before she could respond. The room Ezra showed her to was small but comfortable. A narrow bed covered with a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a window looking out on a world made entirely of white. Ezra was a tall black man in his late 50s with gray hair and kind eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent decades making other people comfortable. "There's hot water in the pitcher, miss. Fresh towels on the rack. Mrs. McAllister's dresses are still in the wardrobe about your size, I'd reckon. Mr. Jacob said you're welcome to use whatever you need." "Mrs. McAllister's things." Clara hesitated. "I couldn't. Ma'am, if you'll forgive me for being forward, those dresses have been sitting in that wardrobe for 3 years. Mrs. Hannah was a practical woman. She wouldn't want good clothes going to waste while a young lady freezes in wet cotton." Clara touched her own dress, still damp from her ordeal, despite the warmth of the house. Ezra had a point. "Thank you, Mr. "Just Ezra, ma'am. Been with this family since before Ben was born. Anything you need, you just ask." "Ezra, can I ask you something?" "Surely." "Mr. McAllister's proposal. Is this something he's done before? Offered marriage to strangers?" Ezra's expression grew thoughtful. "No, ma'am. In 3 years, Mr. Jacob hasn't looked at another woman twice. The ladies in town have tried, Lord knows they've tried, but he ain't interested. He's been like a man walking through his own life without really living it. So why me? Can't say for certain. But I watched him carry you into this house, and I saw something in his face I haven't seen since Mrs. Hannah passed. Hope, maybe. Or just recognition. Like he saw something in you that reminded him of something he'd lost." Clara didn't know what to make of that. She thanked Ezra and closed the door, then stood alone in the quiet room, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been on a stagecoach heading west, running from a past that held nothing but pain. Now she was in a stranger's house wearing a dead woman's clothes, considering a marriage proposal from a man she'd just met. It was madness. Absolute madness. And yet, Clara walked to the window and looked out at the blizzard still raging beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, Pete Wilson's body lay frozen in the snow. Somewhere out there, the broken stagecoach was being buried under drifts. Her old life was disappearing, being erased by winter's relentless hand. Maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was an opportunity. She opened the wardrobe and found it full of simple, practical dresses in dark colors. The clothing of a rancher's wife, sturdy, modest, made for work rather than display. As she changed out of her wet things, Clara felt as if she were putting on more than fabric. She was putting on a possibility. A knock at the door startled her. "Miss..." A small voice. "Maddie. Ezra says supper's almost ready. Are you coming down?" Clara smoothed the borrowed dress and took a deep breath. "I'll be right there." Supper was served in a large kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and roasted meat. Clara found herself seated across from the 2 boys with Jacob at the head of the table, and Ezra moving quietly between the stove and the sideboard. Maddie talked enough for everyone, peppering Clara with questions about Memphis, about nursing, about whether she'd ever seen a real alligator. Ben remained silent, pushing food around his plate and watching her with those 2 old eyes. "Do you know any songs?" Maddie asked between bites of bread. "Mama used to sing songs. Papa doesn't sing." "I know a few." Clara smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. "My mother taught me some old hymns and a few folk songs from Tennessee." "Can you sing one, please?" "Maddie, let Miss Whitmore eat in peace." Jacob's voice was gentle but firm. "But Papa..." "Maybe later." Clara intervened before an argument could start. "After your father and I finish talking about grown-up things, would that be all right?" Maddie considered this compromise seriously. "Promise?" "I promise." Ben made a small sound, almost a snort. "She won't stay long enough to keep promises." "Benjamin?" Jacob's tone sharpened. "What?" "It's true. Women come, they say they'll help, and then they leave. Remember Mrs. Patterson? She lasted 2 weeks before she couldn't handle the isolation." Ben mimicked someone's voice cruelly. "And Miss Turner, 3 days before she decided ranch life was too crude for her delicate sensibilities." Clara set down her fork. How many women have come before me? 5. Ben's voice was flat. In 3 years. Not counting the church ladies who bring casseroles and tell Papa he needs to remarry, then run home to their comfortable houses in town. Ben, that's enough. Jacob's face had gone red. It's all right. Clara kept her voice calm. He's being honest. That's fair. She looked directly at Ben. You're right to be suspicious. You don't know me. I could be just like those other women, all promises and no staying power. Ben blinked, apparently surprised that she wasn't offended. But here's what I know about myself. 2 years ago, I watched my mother die of fever. 6 months later, my father followed her. The man I was supposed to marry told me I wasn't worth loving anymore once the money was gone. I lost my position at the hospital when they cut the budget. I got on that stagecoach with nothing but $3 silver and the clothes on my back. Clara paused, making sure both boys were listening. I have been hungry. I have been cold. I have been rejected by people who were supposed to care about me. And I'm still here. So when your father asks me to consider staying, I'm not thinking about whether the ranch is isolated or the work is hard. I'm thinking about whether there's a place for me here, whether I can belong somewhere again. Silence fell over the table. Maddie's eyes had gone wide. Even Ben's expression had shifted from hostility to something more complicated. Jacob cleared his throat. I think that's enough serious talk for one supper. Ezra, is there any of that apple pie left? The tension broke. Ezra brought out pie. Maddie resumed his cheerful chatter, and the meal continued. But Clara noticed that Ben's gaze kept returning to her face, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become more interesting. After supper, true to her promise, Clara sat by the fire and sang a simple song her mother had taught her. Maddie curled up against her side like a puppy seeking warmth. Ben sat across the room pretending to read a book, but she saw his head tilt toward the music. Jacob watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. When the song ended, Maddie was nearly asleep. Clara lifted him carefully, surprised by how natural the weight felt in her arms. I'll take him to bed, she said quietly. You don't have to, Jacob started. I'd like to. She carried Maddie up the stairs, following Ezra's earlier directions to the boys' room. Ben followed silently, and when Clara tucked Maddie into his bed, she felt the older boy watching her every movement. You're different, Ben said finally. Different how? The other women. They smiled too much, like they were trying to convince us they were happy. You don't smile like that. Maybe because I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm just trying to figure out where I belong. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly she almost missed it. Mama didn't smile fake either. Clara's heart clenched. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. Good night, Ben. Good night, Miss Whitmore. She was at the door when his voice stopped her again. The dress looks nice on you. Mama would have liked that someone was wearing it. Clara didn't trust her voice to respond. She nodded again and left the room, closing the door gently behind her. In the hallway, she allowed herself one moment of weakness. She pressed her back against the wall and let out a shaky breath. 3 days. She had 3 days to decide if this strange wounded family could become her own. 3 days to see if she could build a life from the ashes of everything she'd lost. 3 days until the storm broke, and she would have to choose California and uncertainty, or this ranch, and a man who offered partnership instead of love. Clara straightened her shoulders and walked downstairs. Jacob was still in the sitting room, staring into the fire. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion? They're both asleep, Clara said. Thank you. Maddie doesn't usually settle that easily for strangers. He's a sweet boy. They both are in their own ways. Jacob nodded slowly. Ben's been the man of the house too long. I've leaned on him too much since Hannah passed. That ain't right for a boy his age. He's protecting himself. And protecting Maddie. That's not wrong, it's just hard. You see a lot, Miss Whitmore. I learned to watch people carefully when I was nursing. Sometimes what a patient doesn't say is more important than what they do say. Another silence fell between them. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, a reminder of the storm that had brought her here and now kept her trapped. I should let you rest, Jacob said finally. Tomorrow will be soon enough to talk more about everything. Mr. McAllister. Jacob, if we're going to be discussing marriage, you might as well use my name. Jacob. Clara tested the word. It felt strange on her tongue, intimate almost. Why me? Really? There must be women in town who jump at the chance to marry a successful rancher. Women who come with families with connections with dowries. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. When I carried you into this house, you were more dead than alive, frozen through barely breathing. And the whole time Doc Perkins was working on you, I kept thinking that I couldn't let another woman die in front of me, that if you didn't make it, something in me would break for good. He looked at her directly, and Clara saw the rawness in his eyes. I don't know you, Miss Whitmore, but I know what I saw when you opened your eyes. I saw someone who'd been through hell and was still fighting. Someone who understood loss. Someone who wouldn't give up when things got hard. You saw all that in a few hours. I saw all that in the way you survived what should have killed you. Jacob stood up suddenly, restless. I ain't asking for love. I ain't sure I've got love left to give. But I can offer you a home security and 2 boys who need more than I can give them alone. Maybe that's enough to build something on. Maybe it isn't. That's what these 3 days are for figuring out. Clara nodded slowly. Good night, Jacob. Good night, Miss Whitmore. She walked to the stairs, then paused. Clara. Pardon. If we're going to be discussing marriage, you might as well use my name too. A ghost of a smile touched Jacob's lips, the first she'd seen from him. Good night, Clara. She climbed the stairs to the room that had been Hannah McAllister's, wearing a dead woman's dress, carrying a living woman's hope. The storm raged on outside, but inside the walls of the Rocking M Ranch, something new was beginning to take shape. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever, but possibility. And sometimes, Clara thought as she lay down in the soft bed and listened to the wind howl, possibility was enough. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of voices downstairs. She lay still listening. Jacob's deep rumble. Another man's voice, younger, urgent. Words she couldn't quite make out, but the tone was clear enough. Something was wrong. She dressed quickly in one of Hannah's practical wool dresses and made her way down the stairs. The kitchen was lit by lamplight, and 3 men stood around the table. Jacob Ezra and a younger man with a weathered face and worried eyes. 15 head, the young man was saying. Maybe more. Cut right through the north fence line and drove them toward the old mining road. Jacob's jaw tightened. Anyone see anything? Just tracks, fresh ones. They hit us during the worst of the storm when they knew we'd all be inside. Clara stepped into the room. All 3 men turned to look at her. Trouble? She asked. Jacob hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell her. Then he seemed to make a decision. Cattle rustlers. Someone's been hitting ranches in the area for the past month. Now they've come for us. Will, Ezra said to the young man, this is Miss Whitmore. She's staying with us while the storm passes. Will tipped his hat. Ma'am? Will Lancaster, Jacob added. My foreman, best man I've got. Clara nodded at Will, then looked at Jacob. What can I do to help? Right now, nothing. This is ranch business. I may not know cattle, but I know how to make coffee and keep people fed. If your men are going out in this weather, they'll need hot food when they come back. Jacob studied her for a moment. Something shifted in his expression, not quite surprise, but close to it. Ezra, show her where everything is. Yes, sir. Jacob grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Will followed, but at the threshold, Jacob paused and looked back at Clara. The boys will be up soon. Maddie's scared of storms. Ben pretends he isn't. I'll take care of them. Jacob nodded once and disappeared into the gray morning. Clara turned to Ezra. All right, where do we start? The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Clara learned the layout of the kitchen, the rhythm of the stove, the location of supplies. She made coffee strong enough to strip paint and biscuits that weren't as good as Ezra's, but were serviceable enough. When the boys came downstairs, she had breakfast waiting. Where's Papa? Maddie asked immediately, his eyes scanning the room. He had to go check on the cattle. There was some trouble last night. What kind of trouble? Ben's voice was sharp. Clara considered lying, then decided against it. These boys had lost their mother. They deserved honesty. Someone stole some of your father's cattle. He and Will went to see how bad it is. Ben's face went pale. Rustlers. That's what they think. Papa should have woken me up. I could have helped. Your father needs you here, to protect your brother and help me. Ben opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Clara saw the conflict in his eyes, the desire to prove himself warring with the responsibility he felt for Maddie. Fine, he said finally. But when Papa gets back, I want to know everything. That's fair. They ate breakfast in tense silence. Maddie kept glancing at the door as if expecting his father to walk through at any moment. Ben stared at his plate, jaw clenched. Clara was clearing the dishes when she heard hooves approaching. She dried her hands and moved toward the window, but Ben was faster. It's Papa, and he's got someone with him. They all rushed to the front door. Jacob was dismounting, his face grim. Behind him rode another man, tall, thin, wearing clothes too fine for ranch work. A city man, Clara thought immediately, and something about him set her teeth on edge. Boys, go inside. Jacob's voice brooked no argument. But Papa, now Ben. Clara ushered the boys back into the house, but she stayed in the doorway watching. The stranger dismounted with the easy grace of someone used to making an impression. Mr. McAllister, I assure you my offer is more than generous. And I've told you 3 times now, Mr. Harrington, this land isn't for sale. Harrington. Clara committed the name to memory. Surely you must see reason. Harrington's voice was smooth, oily. The railroad is coming whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you profit from it or get left behind. I've built this ranch from nothing. My wife is buried on this land. My boys were born here. No amount of money changes that. Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sentiment is admirable, Mr. McAllister. But it doesn't feed hungry children or pay ranch hands through a hard winter. My children are fed. My men are paid. And you're no longer welcome on my property. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Harrington's gaze swept across the house, and for a moment it landed on Clara standing in the doorway. Something flickered in his expression. Calculation, maybe, or curiosity. I see you have a guest. Charming. Perhaps she can talk some sense into you. Harrington tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. Ma'am. Clara didn't respond. She simply met his gaze and held it until he looked away. This isn't over, McAllister. Harrington mounted his horse. I'll be back, and next time my offer might not be so generous. He rode away without looking back. Jacob stood in the yard for a long moment, watching until the man disappeared over the ridge. When he finally came inside, his face was tired and drawn. Who was that? Clara asked quietly. Nathaniel Harrington. Works for some railroad company out east. They want my land for a new line, and they're not used to hearing no. He seemed persistent. That's one word for it. Jacob hung up his coat. The rustling started about a month after his first visit. Could be coincidence. But you don't think so? I think there are men who believe everything has a price, and when they find something that doesn't, they get creative about changing the owner's mind. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The cattle. 23 head. Nearly $5,000 worth of breeding stock. Jacob's voice was flat, controlled. It's not enough to break us. Not yet. But if it keeps happening... Papa. Maddie's small voice came from the kitchen doorway. Are the bad men going to take our home? Jacob crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before his son. Nobody's taking our home, Maddie. I promise you that. How do you know? Because this is McAllister land, and McAllisters don't give up what's theirs. Maddie wrapped his arms around his father's neck. Jacob held him tight, his eyes meeting Clara's over his son's shoulder. In that moment, Clara made a decision. She didn't know if she would marry this man. She didn't know if she could build a life here. But she knew with absolute certainty that she would do whatever it took to help protect this family from whatever was coming. The storm outside had barely eased when the first visitor arrived from town. Clara was teaching Maddie to fold napkins, a simple task to keep his hands busy and his mind off his fears, when the sound of a wagon made them both look up. Someone's coming, Ben announced from his post by the window. He'd barely moved from that spot since his father's return, watching the road like a sentinel. Jacob went to the door. Clara heard voices, then footsteps, and then Jacob appeared with a woman in her 40s, dressed in expensive dark wool that spoke of money and position. Clara, this is Mrs. Margaret Prescott. Her husband owns the general store in town. Mrs. Prescott, Miss Clara Whitmore. Mrs. Prescott's eyes swept over Clara with the practiced assessment of a woman used to judging others. Clara felt suddenly aware of every detail of her appearance, the borrowed dress, her simply pinned hair, the roughness of her hands from the morning's work. Miss Whitmore. Mrs. Prescott's voice was carefully neutral. Jacob, I heard about the rustling. Such a shame. I came to see if there was anything the ladies' auxiliary could do to help. That's kind of you, Margaret, but we're managing. Of course you are. You always manage. Mrs. Prescott's gaze returned to Clara. Though I must say I'm surprised to find a guest here, given the circumstances. Miss Whitmore's stagecoach crashed in the storm. We took her in until the road's clear. How charitable. The word carried an edge. And she's staying... Where exactly? Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She knew exactly what Mrs. Prescott was implying. I'm staying in the downstairs guest room, Mrs. Prescott. Clara kept her voice calm. Mr. McAllister has been nothing but proper. I'm sure. Jacob's jaw tightened. Margaret, if you've come to help, you're welcome. If you've come to gossip, you know where the door is. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Mrs. Prescott's expression flickered surprise, maybe, or recalculation. Jacob McAllister, I've known you since you were a boy fighting with sticks behind my father's store. Don't you take that tone with me. Then don't come into my home and insult my guest. Mrs. Prescott was silent for a long moment. Then unexpectedly she laughed. Hannah always said you had a spine of iron under all that quiet. Good to see she was right. She turned to Clara with a look that was slightly less hostile. Miss Whitmore, I apologize. Small town, long winter. We get protective of our own, sometimes too protective. Clara nodded carefully. I understand. Do you... Mrs. Prescott tilted her head. This is hard country, Miss Whitmore. It breaks people. Women especially. Many have come here thinking they could handle it, only to run back east when the reality set in. I'm not running anywhere, Mrs. Prescott. Not because I don't have anywhere to go, I do. But because running is what I've been doing for 2 years, and I'm tired. Something shifted in Mrs. Prescott's expression. Not quite approval, but the absence of disapproval. Well, we'll see. She turned back to Jacob. The church social is next Sunday, assuming the weather holds. You should come. Bring Miss Whitmore. Let the town see there's nothing improper going on. That's up to Clara. Miss Whitmore. Mrs. Prescott raised an eyebrow. What do you say? Ready to face the wolves? Clara thought of all the judgment she'd faced in Memphis after her family lost everything. The whispers, the turned backs, the way people she'd known her whole life suddenly didn't recognize her on the street. "I've faced worse than small-town gossip, Mrs. Prescott." "Have you now?" Mrs. Prescott actually smiled a small, grudging expression. "Then maybe you're tougher than you look. Sunday, 2 o'clock. Don't be late." After she left, Clara found her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her apron and took a deep breath. "You didn't have to do that." Jacob's voice came from behind her.
"Do what?" "Stand up to her. She's the most influential woman in town. She could make your life very difficult."
"She could."
Clara turned to face him. "Or she could become an ally. Women like Mrs. Prescott respect strength. They despise weakness. You've known women like her before. I was engaged to a doctor's son in Memphis. His mother was exactly like Mrs. Prescott, except with more money and less honesty about what she wanted." Jacob studied her face. "What happened?" "When my family lost everything, she convinced her son I was no longer suitable. He agreed, rather quickly in fact. He was a fool." The words were simple, spoken without sentiment, but they hit Clara with unexpected force. She looked away, not wanting him to see how much they affected her. "Papa!" Ben appeared in the doorway. "Can I talk to you alone?" Jacob glanced at Clara, then followed his son into the study.
Clara busied herself with chores, but the old house carried sound easily. She couldn't help but hear. "Is she going to be our new mama?" Ben's voice was thin, strained. "Ben, because I don't want a new mama. Mama was perfect, and no one can replace her, and I don't understand why you need someone else when we were doing fine by ourselves." "Were we doing fine, Ben?" "Really?" Silence. Then quieter. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean we need her. I haven't decided anything yet. Neither has Miss Whitmore. All I've asked is for her to stay a few days, see what life here is like." "And then what? You marry her. She becomes Mrs. McAllister. She sleeps in Mama's room and wears Mama's clothes and pretends Mama never existed." "Benjamin," Jacob's voice sharpened, "your mother will always exist, in this house, in our memories, in you and your brother. No one could ever replace her. But that doesn't mean we have to be alone forever. I'd rather be alone than pretend someone else's family." Clara heard footsteps, and then Ben burst out of the study and ran upstairs. A door slammed hard enough to shake the walls. She found Jacob standing by the fireplace, one hand braced against the mantel, head bowed. "I heard," she said softly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He's not wrong to be angry." Jacob didn't look up. "I've asked too much of him. Put too much on his shoulders. He's 9 years old, and I've made him carry the weight of a man. He's protecting himself. And you. That's not weakness, Jacob. That's love. It's also fear. And I don't know how to help him stop being afraid." Clara moved closer. "You can't make fear go away. But you can show him that it's safe to feel other things too. Safe to let people in." Jacob finally raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "How do I show him that when I'm not sure I believe it myself?" Clara didn't have an answer. She stood beside him in silence, watching the fire burn low. The next morning brought a break in the storm. Not an end. The sky was still gray and threatening, but a pause. Jacob announced at breakfast that he needed to ride out and check the fence lines. "I'll be gone most of the day. Will's coming with me and 2 of the other hands." He looked at Clara. "You'll be all right here. Ezra and I can manage." "Ben." Jacob turned to his older son. "You're the man of the house while I'm gone." Ben's chin lifted with pride, but Clara caught the flash of fear in his eyes. So much responsibility for such young shoulders. "Yes, sir." After Jacob and his men rode out, Clara set about making the day as normal as possible. She taught Maddie his letters, letting him trace them in flour on the kitchen table, while she baked bread. She mended a tear in one of Ben's shirts, humming softly as she worked. Ben watched her from across the room, pretending to read, but never turning the pages. "You don't have to like me," Clara said without looking up from her needle. I never said I didn't like you. You didn't have to say it. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then, how long did it take? How long did what take? After your mama died. How long until it stopped hurting? Clara set down her mending. This question deserved her full attention. It never stops hurting, Ben. Not completely. But it changes. At first, the pain is everywhere, every breath, every thought. Then it starts to find its place. It becomes smaller, more contained. You can go hours without feeling it, then days. But it's always there like a scar that aches when the weather changes. That sounds terrible. It's just true. But here's the thing about scars, they mean you survived. They mean you were strong enough to heal, even though it hurt. Ben's carefully constructed armor cracked just a little. Clara saw the frightened boy beneath the serious exterior. I don't remember what she smelled like anymore, he whispered. Mama. I remember her face and her voice and the way she laughed, but I can't remember her smell. And it makes me feel like I'm forgetting her. Oh, Ben. Clara set aside her sewing and moved to sit beside him. You're not forgetting her. Our memories just work differently as time passes. The details fade, but the love stays. The way she made you feel safe, cherished, seen, that doesn't go away. How do you know? Because I can't remember exactly what my mother's hands looked like anymore. But I still remember how they felt when she stroked my hair. I remember the feeling even when the picture gets blurry. A tear slipped down Ben's cheek. He wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. I miss her so much. I know. Sometimes I'm angry at her, for leaving. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Is that wrong? No. That's grief. It's messy and complicated and doesn't follow rules. You can love someone and be angry at them at the same time. That's allowed. Ben sat very still. Then slowly he leaned against Clara's shoulder. She put her arm around him carefully, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long moment, the fire crackling, and Maddie's voice drifting in from the kitchen, where Ezra was teaching him to roll pie crust. I don't hate you, Ben said finally. I don't know how to make room for someone new. You don't have to make room all at once. We can take it slow. Figure it out together. What if I can't? What if I try and I just can't? Clara tightened her arm around him. Then we'll figure that out too. But Ben, I think you're stronger than you know. I think you've been holding this family together with nothing but willpower and love, and that's not nothing. That's everything. Ben made a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. You're not like the others, he said. The other women who came, they all wanted to fix us, like we were broken and they could just put us back together. You don't do that. Because you're not broken. You're surviving. There's a difference. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Ben pulled away quickly, swiping at his face. That's not Papa. Too early. Clara went to the window. A single rider was approaching, moving fast. Stay inside, she told Ben. Keep Maddie in the kitchen. She went to the door, her heart pounding. The rider was a young man she didn't recognize, barely out of his teens, wearing ranch clothes and an expression of barely controlled panic. Ma'am? He reined in his horse hard. Is Mr. McAllister here? He's out checking the fence lines. What's wrong? We found one of his men, shot and left for dead near Blackwater Creek. He's at the Henderson place now, but he's in bad shape. Real bad. Clara's blood ran cold. Which man? Will Lancaster, ma'am. Mr. McAllister's foreman. Will. The quiet, competent man who'd helped carry her out of the snow. Who'd stood in this kitchen just yesterday worried about stolen cattle. Is there a doctor? Doc's in town 2 hours away at least. Mrs. Henderson sent me to fetch Mr. McAllister, but if he's not here, I'm a nurse. The words came out before Clara could think. Or I was training to be one. I can help. The young man hesitated. Ma'am, I don't know. Is there anyone else? He shook his head slowly. Clara turned to find Ben standing in the doorway, his face pale. Ben, I need you to take care of Maddie until your father gets back. Can you do that? What about you? Someone's hurt. I have to help. Ben's jaw set with determination that reminded her painfully of Jacob. Go. I've got Maddie. Clara squeezed his shoulder, then grabbed her cloak and followed the young man to his horse. The ride to the Henderson place was the longest 20 minutes of Clara's life. She clung to the saddle behind the young rider. Jeb, he said his name was, and tried to prepare herself for what she would find. Will was laid out on a table in the Henderson kitchen, unconscious and deathly pale. A woman who had to be Mrs. Henderson hovered nearby, wringing her hands. Thank God. She rushed forward when Clara entered. Are you the doctor? I'm a nurse, or I was training to be. Let me see him. Clara pushed aside her fear and let her training take over. The wound was in Will's shoulder, the bullet still lodged deep. He'd lost a lot of blood, the makeshift bandages were soaked through, but he was still breathing. I need hot water, clean cloth, any alcohol you have, whiskey, brandy, anything, and a knife the sharpest you've got. You're going to operate. Mrs. Henderson's voice rose with panic. I'm going to remove a bullet before it poisons his blood, unless you'd rather wait 2 hours for the doctor and hope he doesn't die first. Mrs. Henderson hurried away to gather supplies. Clara rolled up her sleeves and began cleaning the wound, murmuring reassurances that Will couldn't hear. You're going to be all right, she whispered. You're going to be all right because Jacob needs you, and those boys need their father safe, and you're going to help me keep them safe. You hear me, Will Lancaster? You don't get to die today. The bullet came out clean. Clara stitched the wound with steady hands, drawing on skills she'd thought she might never use again. When she finally stepped back, her arms ached and her borrowed dress was ruined with blood. But Will's breathing had steadied. His color was coming back. He'll live, Mrs. Henderson asked. If infection doesn't set in, he needs rest and careful watching. Clara wiped her hands on a cloth. Someone should send word to Mr. McAllister. Jeb already went. Clara nodded. She felt suddenly exhausted, the weight of the past hours crashing down on her. Mrs. Henderson's voice had softened. What you did? I've never seen anything like it. You just walked in here and took over like you'd done it 100 times. I have. Not here, but in another life. Well? Mrs. Henderson straightened her shoulders. Whatever life brought you to us, I'm grateful. Will Lancaster's a good man. He doesn't deserve to die in some ranch kitchen from a Rustlers bullet. No one deserves that. The sound of horses made them both turn. Clara went to the window and saw Jacob dismounting, his face tight with worry. He burst through the door without knocking. Will, is he? He's alive. Clara stepped into his path. I removed the bullet. He's stable. Jacob stared at her, then past her to where Will lay breathing evenly on the table. You did that? You operated on him? Someone had to. Jacob's hands came up to grip her shoulders. His fingers trembled. Clara. His voice was rough with emotion. Clara, I can't. It's all right. She covered his hands with hers. He's going to be all right. Jacob pulled her against his chest in a fierce embrace. Clara felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt the desperate relief pouring off him. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you. She didn't know how long they stood there. When Jacob finally released her, his eyes were wet. The boys, Ben's with them. He's being very brave. And the men who did this? Clara hesitated. Will was conscious for a few minutes when I first arrived. He said there were 3 of them, and one was wearing a silver ring with a railroad emblem on it. Jacob's expression went cold, hard, dangerous. Harrington. We don't know that for certain. No, but I'm going to find out. He turned toward the door. Will you stay with Will until I get back? Jacob, you can't just... I won't do anything stupid. He paused at the threshold. But if that man sent people to shoot my foreman on my land, there will be consequences, one way or another. He was gone before she could argue. Clara sank into a chair beside Will's unconscious form and pressed her blood-stained hands to her face. She'd come here looking for shelter. She'd found a family on the edge of violence, and somehow in the space of 3 days she'd stopped being a guest. She was part of this now, for better or worse, and God help her, she didn't want to leave. Jacob didn't return that night. Clara sat by Will's bedside at the Henderson place watching the wounded man's chest rise and fall, her mind spinning with terrible possibilities. Mrs. Henderson had sent her husband to the Rocking M to check on the boys, and word came back that Ezra had everything under control. But Jacob was still out there, somewhere, doing something that might get him killed. You care about him. Will's voice, weak but clear, made Clara jump. She leaned forward, pressing her hand to his forehead. The fever was mild, manageable. You should be resting. Hard to rest when I can hear you worrying. Will's eyes cracked open. He's a stubborn man, Miss Whitmore. But he ain't stupid. He won't do anything reckless. He rode off to confront the people who shot you. To get information, not to start a war. Will tried to shift and winced. Jacob McAllister has survived worse than railroad men with bad intentions. He knows how to pick his battles. Clara wanted to believe that. She wanted to trust that Jacob would come back safe, that this nightmare would end with justice, instead of more bloodshed. Tell me about him, she said. About who he was before. Will was quiet for a moment. Before Hannah died, you mean? Yes. He was different. Not softer exactly. Jacob's always been hard when he needed to be. But he laughed more, dreamed more. He and Hannah used to sit on the porch after the boys went to bed talking about all the things they wanted to build. A bigger house, a school for the children in the area, a church closer than the one in town. Will's voice grew distant. When she died, all those dreams died with her. He stopped looking forward. Started just surviving. And the boys? Ben took it hardest. He was old enough to understand what he'd lost. Maddie. Maddie was too young to remember much, but he knows something's missing. He feels the absence, even if he can't name it. Clara thought of Ben's fierce protectiveness, Maddie's desperate need for affection. 2 boys carrying wounds they were too young to understand. Why did he ask me to stay? She whispered. Really? Will turned his head to look at her directly. Because when he carried you into that house half dead and frozen, something woke up in him. Something that's been sleeping for 3 years. Hope. Maybe. Or maybe just the realization that he was tired of being alone. Will's eyes drifted closed. Whatever it was, Miss Whitmore, I haven't seen him this alive since Hannah passed. That's worth something. The door burst open, and Clara was on her feet before she could think. Jacob stood in the doorway covered in dust and exhaustion, but unharmed. Behind him, 2 men in deputy badges flanked a 3rd man whose hands were bound, one of the Rustlers, Clara realized. Young, barely out of his teens with terrified eyes. Caught him near the old mining road, Jacob said. He's ready to talk. The deputy, a heavy-set man named Crawford, pushed the prisoner into a chair. All right, son. Tell them what you told us. The young man's voice shook. It was Harrington. He hired us through a man named Silas Blackwood. Said all we had to do was spook the ranchers, steal some cattle, make them want to sell. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Will Lancaster's got a bullet in his shoulder that says different, Jacob growled. That wasn't supposed to happen, Silas. He got scared when Will saw his face. Said we couldn't leave any witnesses. The prisoner's face crumpled. I didn't sign up for killing. I swear I didn't. I just needed the money. Crawford stepped forward. We've already wired the territorial marshal. Harrington's being brought in for questioning. Questioning. Jacob's voice went dangerously quiet. "He sent men to shoot my foreman, to steal my cattle, to drive me off land that's been in my family for 20 years. And he'll answer for it, through the law." Crawford met Jacob's gaze steadily. "I know you want blood, McAllister, but if you go after Harrington yourself, you'll end up in a cell right next to him. Think about those boys of yours." Clara watched the struggle play out on Jacob's face. The rage, the helplessness, the desperate need to protect what was his. She stepped forward and touched his arm. "Jacob." He looked at her, and some of the fury drained from his eyes. "Let the law handle it," she said softly. "Will's alive. The ranch is safe. Don't throw away everything for revenge." Jacob was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Get him out of here," he told Crawford. "Before I change my mind." After the deputies left with their prisoner, Jacob sank into a chair beside Will's bed. He looked utterly spent, like a man who'd been running on nothing but willpower and had finally hit empty. "Will, how are you feeling?" "Like I got shot." Will managed a weak smile. "But Miss Whitmore here patched me up good. Better than Doc Miller could have done." Jacob turned to Clara. "Mrs. Henderson told me what you did. How you took charge, got the bullet out, saved his life." "I did what needed doing." "You did more than that." Jacob's voice was rough. "You protected my family when I wasn't here to do it myself. That's what family does." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Clara felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. "The boys," Jacob said. "Are they?" Ezra sent word. "They're fine. Ben's been keeping watch like you asked." Clara hesitated. "He was very brave, Jacob. He wanted to come help, but I told him you needed him at home." "You told him right." Jacob reached out and took her hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, trembling slightly. "Clara, when this is over, when things settle down, we need to talk." "I know. The 3 days are almost up." "I know that too." Will cleared his throat. "If you two are going to have a moment, could you do it somewhere I'm not trying to sleep?" Clara laughed a real laugh, the first one in what felt like forever. Jacob's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Come on," he said, standing. "Let's get you home." The ride back to the rocking M was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not awkward or uncertain, but peaceful. Like two people who'd been through something together and come out the other side. When they reached the ranch, Ben was waiting on the porch. He launched himself at his father before Jacob had even fully dismounted. "You came back." Ben's voice was muffled against Jacob's coat. "I knew you would, but I was scared. I was so scared, Papa." Jacob held his son tight. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Maddie appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Papa is the bad man caught." "He's caught, son. It's over." But even as he said the words, Clara saw the shadow in Jacob's eyes. It wasn't over. Not really. Harrington might be in custody, but men like him had resources, connections, ways of slithering out of trouble. This battle was won. The war wasn't finished. The next few days passed in a blur of healing and hope. Will was moved to this bunkhouse where the other ranch hands could take turns watching him. His wound was mending well, and Clara visited daily to change his bandages and check for infection. The church social loomed closer, and Clara found herself dreading it more with each passing hour. "You don't have to go," Jacob told her the morning of. "Nobody would blame you for staying home after everything that's happened. Mrs. Prescott would blame me, and she'd make sure the whole town knew I was a coward. Since when do you care what the town thinks? Since I started thinking about staying." Clara looked at him directly. "If I'm going to be part of this community, I need to face them. On my terms, not theirs." Jacob studied her face. "You're staying?" "I'm considering it." Something sparked in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or something warmer. "Then I'll be right beside you, every step." The church was packed when they arrived. Every head turned as Jacob walked in with Clara on his arm and the boys trailing behind. Whispers spread through the congregation like wildfire. That's her, the one who was staying at his house. Alone with him for days. Scandalous. But didn't you hear? She saved Will Lancaster's life? Mrs. Prescott appeared out of the crowd like a general surveying her troops. Her eyes swept over Clara's borrowed dress, one of Hannah's nicer ones, dark blue with white lace at the collar, and her expression was unreadable. Miss Whitmore, you came. You invited me. I did, didn't I? Mrs. Prescott glanced at Jacob, then back at Clara. The whole town's been talking, you know, about the operation, about how you pulled a bullet out of Will Lancaster with nothing but kitchen tools and steady hands. It wasn't quite that dramatic. Wasn't it? Mrs. Prescott's voice rose carrying across the church. The way I heard it, you walked into Mary Henderson's kitchen, took one look at a dying man and saved his life while the rest of us stood around wringing our hands. That sounds fairly dramatic to me. The whispers shifted. Clara felt the attention of the room pressing in on her like a physical weight. I did what any trained nurse would do. But you're not just any nurse, are you? Mrs. Prescott stepped closer. You're a woman who survived a stagecoach crash, walked 2 miles through a blizzard, and then turned around and performed surgery on a man she'd only just met. That takes more than training, Miss Whitmore. That takes character. Clara didn't know what to say. This wasn't the confrontation she'd expected. This community needs women like you, Mrs. Prescott continued. Women with spine and skill. Heaven knows we've got enough of the fainting couch type already. She shot a pointed look at several women who quickly looked away. So, I'm going to say this once, and I expect everyone to listen carefully. The church went silent. Miss Whitmore is a guest in our community. She has conducted herself with courage and integrity. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. Mrs. Prescott's gaze swept the room like a lighthouse beam. Are we understood? Murmurs of assent rippled through the congregation. Clara felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Now then, Mrs. Prescott's tone shifted to something almost friendly. The ladies' auxiliary is meeting after the service. We could use someone with medical experience on the committee. Interested? Clara blinked. Yes, I'd be honored. Good. We'll discuss it over pie. Mrs. Prescott swept away, leaving Clara feeling like she'd just survived a hurricane. Jacob appeared at her elbow. What just happened? I think I just got adopted by the most powerful woman in town. That's either very good or very dangerous, possibly both. The service was unremarkable, but Clara barely heard a word. Her mind kept drifting to Jacob beside her, to the boys fidgeting in the pew, to the future that seemed suddenly possible. After the service, the social began in earnest. Tables laden with food appeared outside the church, and the community gathered in clusters, sharing news and gossip. Clara found herself approached by women who'd avoided her gaze just an hour before. They asked about nursing, about Memphis, about the stagecoach crash. Some were genuinely curious. Others were clearly fishing for gossip. Clara answered carefully, revealing only what she chose to reveal. She was deep in conversation with the doctor's wife when a commotion near the church doors caught her attention. Harrington. He strode into the social like he owned it, flanked by 2 well-dressed men who had the look of lawyers. His clothes were immaculate, his smile confident, his manner utterly unruffled by the fact that he'd been arrested for conspiracy just days before. Friends, neighbors, Harrington's voice carried across the crowd. I know there have been some misunderstandings recently. I want to assure everyone that the accusations against me were entirely baseless. I've been released without charges. Clara felt Jacob stiffen beside her. Released? Jacob's voice cut through the murmurs. You sent men to steal my cattle and shoot my foreman. I did no such thing. Harrington's smile never wavered. A few desperate criminals tried to implicate me in their crimes. The authorities saw through their lies immediately. The boy confessed. He named you. The confused testimony of a frightened young man who was clearly trying to reduce his own sentence. Hardly reliable evidence. Harrington spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. I'm a businessman, Mr. McAllister. I make offers. I negotiate. I don't send men with guns to do my talking for me. You're a liar. Careful. Harrington's smile sharpened. Slander is actionable. My lawyers here would be happy to explain the details. Clara stepped forward before she could stop herself. Mr. Harrington, isn't it true that you've made multiple offers to purchase Mr. McAllister's land? Harrington's gaze shifted to her with something like surprise. Business inquiries, nothing more. The railroad needs land. I find willing sellers. That's hardly criminal. And when sellers aren't willing, what then? Then I move on to the next opportunity. Harrington's eyes hardened. I don't believe we've been introduced, miss. Clara Whitmore. I'm the woman who pulled a bullet out of Will Lancaster's shoulder. The bullet your men put there. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Prescott's eyes went wide with something that might have been approval. Harrington's composure cracked just for an instant. I had nothing to do with that. The man who shot him was wearing a ring with a railroad emblem. Your railroad's emblem specifically. Circumstantial. Perhaps. But interesting, don't you think? Clara held his gaze. A man who works for your company shoots a rancher who refused to sell to you. And you expect us to believe it's coincidence. I expect you to believe the truth. The truth. Clara stepped closer. The truth is that you're a predator, Mr. Harrington. You target vulnerable people. You use intimidation and violence when persuasion fails. And you hide behind lawyers and money when the consequences catch up to you. You don't know anything about me. I know men like you. I was engaged to one. Clara's voice never wavered. He made promises he never intended to keep. He smiled while he lied. And when things got difficult, he disappeared behind his family's money and left me to face the wreckage alone. The crowd had gone absolutely silent. Even Harrington's lawyers looked uncomfortable. So when I say I see through you, Mr. Harrington, I mean it. You can fool the authorities. You might even fool some of these good people. But you don't fool me. And you don't fool Jacob McAllister. And sooner or later, your lies will catch up to you. Harrington's face had gone pale with fury. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually strike her. Then Mrs. Prescott stepped between them. Mr. Harrington, I believe you've worn out your welcome. This is a church social, not a courtroom. Take your lawyers and go. You can't. I can and I am. Leave now or I'll have Deputy Crawford escort you out. Mrs. Prescott's voice was ice. And don't bother coming back to Bitter Creek. You're not welcome here. Harrington looked around at the hostile faces surrounding him. Whatever he saw there convinced him that retreat was the better option. This isn't over, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on Jacob. Not by a long shot. He left with his lawyers trailing behind. The moment he was gone, Clara felt her knees go weak. Jacob's arm came around her waist, steadying her. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen, he murmured. Probably both. You just made a powerful enemy. I think he was already my enemy. Clara leaned into Jacob's support. I just made it official. Mrs. Prescott appeared at her elbow. Miss Whitmore, I believe I owe you an apology. For what? For underestimating you. The older woman's eyes gleamed with newfound respect. When I said this community needed women with spine, I had no idea how much spine you actually had. That was magnificent. That was reckless. Same thing in my experience. Mrs. Prescott glanced at Jacob. You'd be a fool to let this one go, McAllister. I know. Good. See that you don't forget it. She swept away to deal with the aftermath of Harrington's visit. Jacob turned Clara to face him. Around them, the social was slowly returning to normal people, gathering in groups to discuss what had just happened. You defended my family, he said quietly, in front of everyone. Someone had to. No, someone didn't have to. You chose to. Jacob's hands came up to cup her face. Clara, I know we said 3 days. I know this was supposed to be a trial period. But I think I already know what I want. Jacob, let me finish, please. He took a breath. When Hannah died, I told myself I'd never feel that way again, that I couldn't survive losing someone else. So I closed myself off. From everyone. From everything. Even from my own boys in some ways. Clara's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. But then you showed up half frozen and fighting to live. And something in me woke up. Something I thought was dead forever. Jacob's voice broke. I'm not asking for love. I know that takes time. But I'm asking you to stay. To build something with me. To be part of this family for real. The boys already love you. Even Ben, though he'd die before admitting it. Clara laughed through her tears. He's stubborn. Like his father. Like his father. Jacob smiled a real smile, one that transformed his face. Clara Whitmore, I'm asking you to marry me. Not because you need shelter or I need a housekeeper, but because I want you here. Because this house feels like a home when you're in it. Because you're brave and kind and more stubborn than anyone I've ever met. That's not a very romantic proposal. I'm not a very romantic man, but I'll try to be, if you'll let me. Clara looked at this man, this complicated, wounded, beautiful man, and thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The losses, the betrayals, the long, lonely road that had led her to his door. And she thought about the future, about Ben's guarded heart slowly opening, about Maddie's infectious joy, about building something from the ashes of everything she'd lost. Yes, she whispered. Jacob blinked. Yes. Yes. I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be part of this family. Jacob kissed her. Right there in front of the entire town, in front of God and Mrs. Prescott and everyone. And Clara kissed him back, not caring who saw, not caring what they thought. When they finally broke apart, she became aware of cheering. The townspeople were actually applauding, some of them with tears in their eyes. Well, Mrs. Prescott said dryly, I suppose that settles that. Ben and Maddie pushed through the crowd. Maddie was bouncing with excitement. Ben's face was carefully controlled, but Clara could see the hope in his eyes. Does this mean you're staying for real? Maddie demanded. Like forever. Forever, Clara confirmed. Maddie whooped and threw his arms around her. Ben hung back uncertain. Clara knelt down to his level. Ben, I know this is a lot to take in. I know you're scared. But I promise I'm not going anywhere. And I will never ever try to replace your mother. I just want to be here, to be part of your family. Is that okay? Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. It's okay, he said softly. I think Mama would have liked you. Clara pulled him into a hug, and this time he didn't pull away. The celebration that followed felt like a dream. People who'd barely acknowledged Clara that morning now congratulated her warmly. Food appeared from nowhere. Someone produced a fiddle and started playing. Before Clara knew it, she was dancing with Jacob while the boys clapped along, and the whole town watched with approval. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life turning out. This wasn't the future she'd planned. But standing in Jacob's arms, surrounded by people who were becoming her community, watching Ben and Maddie laugh together for the first time in days, Clara realized something important. Sometimes the best futures were the ones you never saw coming. The evening was winding down when Deputy Crawford approached with an expression that wiped the smile from Jacob's face. We've got a problem, Crawford said quietly. Harrington's men, the ones we arrested, they escaped from the jail in town about an hour ago. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Escaped how? Someone from the outside helped them, cut through the bars while my deputy was making rounds. Crawford's jaw tightened. 3 men armed and angry, And Harrington's disappeared too. No one's seen him since he left the social. Jacob's arm tightened around Clara's waist. They'll come for the ranch. That's what I'm thinking. How much time do we have? Hard to say. Could be tonight, could be tomorrow. Crawford met Jacob's eyes. I've sent word to the territorial marshal, but he's 2 days out at least. In the meantime, you need to protect your family. Clara thought of Ben and Maddie, of the warm house that had become her home, of everything they'd built in such a short time. Then that's what we'll do, she said firmly. Whatever it takes. They left the church social immediately. Jacob drove the wagon hard, pushing the horses faster than was safe on the dark roads. Clara sat beside him with Maddie in her lap, the boy's face buried against her shoulder. Ben rode in the back, silent and pale, his small hands gripping the wagon's sides. Ezra will have heard something by now, Jacob said, his voice tight. He's got good instincts. He'll have started preparing. How many men do we have at the ranch? 4 counting Will, but Will's still healing. 3.5 really. 3.5 men against however many Harrington could muster. Clara did the math and didn't like the answer. We could go to town, she said. Stay with the Hendersons until the marshal arrives. And let them burn my ranch to the ground while we hide. Jacob's jaw clenched. This is McAllister land. My father built that house with his own hands. Hannah is buried there. I won't abandon it. Clara understood. She'd abandoned everything once before her home, her dreams, her entire life. She wouldn't ask Jacob to do the same. Then we fight. Jacob glanced at her. You don't have to be part of this. Yes, I do. You asked me to be part of this family. That means the hard parts, too. They reached the ranch to find Ezra already organizing the defense. The old man had sent the cattle to the far pastures, barricaded the barn, and armed every ranch hand who could hold a rifle. Figured trouble was coming, Ezra said as they pulled up. Got the boys' room set up in the root cellar. Safest place on the property. No. Ben's voice cut through the darkness. I'm not hiding in a cellar like a baby. Ben, Jacob started. I can shoot. You taught me yourself. I'm 9 years old, Papa. I can help. Clara watched Jacob's face contort with the impossible choice. His son wanted to fight, but putting a child in danger went against everything a father was supposed to do. You can help by protecting your brother, Clara said, stepping in. Maddie needs you, Ben. If something happens, if we need to get out fast, he'll need someone brave to keep him safe. Can you do that? Ben's expression flickered between frustration and pride. That's not the same as fighting. It's more important than fighting. Anyone can pull a trigger. But keeping the people you love safe, that takes real courage. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Fine. But if they get through, if they come for us, they won't. Jacob gripped his son's shoulder. I promise you, Ben, they won't get through. The next few hours passed in tense preparation. Clara helped Ezra stock the root cellar with food, water, and blankets. She loaded rifles with hands that trembled only slightly. She checked on Will, who insisted on getting up despite his wound. I can still shoot with one arm, Will said, wincing as he pulled on his boots. Ain't missing this fight. You could tear your stitches. Rather tear stitches than watch this family get hurt because I was lying in bed feeling sorry for myself. Clara couldn't argue with that logic. By midnight, they were as ready as they could be. Jacob positioned his men around the house, one in the barn, one on the roof, one covering the back. Will took up position by the front window, despite Clara's protests. Ezra stationed himself near the root cellar, the last line of defense, if everything went wrong. Clara found herself in the kitchen, rifle across her lap, watching the darkness through the window. Jacob came to stand beside her. You should be in the cellar with the boys. And leave you up here alone. Not a chance. Clara. I told you before, Jacob, I can shoot. My father taught me when I was 12. And I didn't survive everything I've survived just to hide in a hole while people I love are in danger. People I love. The words hung between them more powerful than any formal declaration. Jacob reached out and cupped her face. If something happens to me tonight, nothing's going to happen to you. If it does, he continued, I need you to take the boys and run. Get to town. Get to the marshal. Get somewhere safe. Promise me. Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that she wouldn't leave, that she'd fight beside him until her last breath. But she saw the desperation in his eyes, the need to know that his children would be protected no matter what. I promise. Jacob kissed her hard, desperate, like a man saying goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you, he said. I should have said it before, but I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. I love you too. Clara pressed her forehead against his. Now let's survive this so we can actually get married. A whistle from the roof, the signal. Someone was coming. Jacob moved to the window, rifle raised. Clara positioned herself on the other side, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear. 3 riders, came the quiet report from above. No, wait. 4, 5, they're spreading out. 5 men, against their 4 plus Clara. The odds were almost even, but Harrington's men were criminals desperate with nothing to lose. Hold fire until they're in range, Jacob called softly. Make every shot count. The waiting was the worst part. Clara watched the darkness, straining to see movement, her finger resting beside the trigger. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every sound made her jump. Then a voice rang out across the yard. McAllister, we know you're in there. Silas Blackwood. Clara recognized the name from Will's description. Harrington's enforcer, the one who'd given the order to shoot Will. Come out and let's talk this over. Nobody else has to get hurt. You shot my foreman, Jacob shouted back. You think I'm going to believe anything you say? That was a mistake. Harrington's willing to make it right. Double his original offer for the land. That's more money than you'd see in a lifetime of ranching. My answer's the same as before. This land isn't for sale. A long pause. Then Blackwood's voice turned cold. That's too bad. We were hoping to do this the easy way. The first shot shattered the kitchen window. Clara ducked as glass exploded inward. More shots followed, a barrage of gunfire that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She heard Jacob returning fire, heard answering shots from the barn and roof. Stay down, Jacob yelled. Clara crawled across the floor to a better position. Through the broken window, she could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. She raised her rifle, took aim at one of the flashes, and fired. A scream. She'd hit something. Good shot, Will called from his position. There was no time to feel anything about it. More shots came, and Clara fired back, her hands steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. The attack lasted an eternity. It lasted 5 minutes. When the shooting finally stopped, Clara's ears were ringing. She stayed low, waiting, not trusting the sudden silence. Papa, Ben's voice muffled from the direction of the root cellar. Stay where you are, Jacob called. Don't come out yet. Clara risked a look through the window. Bodies lay in the yard, 2, maybe 3, but movement near the barn caught her eye. Jacob, the barn. A figure burst from the shadows, running toward the house. Not one of their men. An attacker somehow circling around. Clara raised her rifle and fired. The shot went wide. The figure kept coming, crashed through the back door, and suddenly he was inside. Silas Blackwood. He was bleeding from a wound in his leg, but the gun in his hand was steady. His eyes locked onto Clara. You're the nurse, the one who saved Lancaster. His voice was eerily calm. Harrington told me about you, said you were trouble. Drop your weapon. Clara kept her rifle trained on him, but he was too close. If she fired, he could fire back before the bullet hit. Here's what's going to happen. Blackwood moved sideways, putting his back to the wall. You're going to put down that rifle. Then you're going to call off your men. Then we're all going to have a nice civilized conversation about real estate. And if I don't, then I start shooting. And I'm very good at shooting. His eyes flicked toward the hallway that led to the root cellar. especially small targets. Clara felt ice flood her veins. He knew where the boys were. "Don't." Her voice came out as a whisper. "Put down the rifle." Clara's mind raced. If she surrendered, they were all dead anyway. Blackwood had no reason to leave witnesses. But if she fought, he might kill her before she could stop him. And then there would be no one between him and the children. "Clara!" Jacob's voice from the front room. "Clara, what's happening?" Blackwood's gun swung toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, Clara made her choice. She dropped the rifle. "Smart girl." Blackwood's attention returned to her. "Now call him in here, nice and slow." "Jacob," Clara called, her voice steady. "There's a man in the kitchen. He's armed. He wants to talk." She prayed Jacob would understand, would read the warning in her two calm words. Footsteps. Jacob appeared in the doorway, his rifle raised. "Drop it, McAllister, unless you want to watch your lady friend die." Jacob's eyes met Clara's. She saw him calculating measuring angles, searching for an opening. "There's no way out of this," Jacob said slowly. "Even if you kill us, my men will gun you down before you make it 10 feet. Maybe, but you'll still be dead." Blackwood smiled a thin, cruel expression. "And those pretty little boys hiding in the cellar, they'll be orphans. Again." Something shifted in Jacob's face, a hardness Clara had never seen before. "You shouldn't have mentioned my boys." "What are you going to do about it?" "This." Jacob dove sideways as he fired. Blackwood's gun went off at the same moment. Clara felt the bullet pass so close to her face that she felt the heat of it. But Jacob's shot found its mark. Blackwood staggered, clutching his chest. His gun clattered to the floor. He looked down at the spreading red stain with something like surprise. "Huh," he said. "Didn't think he'd actually—" He collapsed. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare at the body on her kitchen floor. "Clara." Jacob was suddenly beside her, his hands on her shoulders. "Clara, look at me." She forced her eyes to meet his. "Are you hurt? Did he hit you?" She shook her head, the movement jerky. "The boys. We need to check on the boys." They found Ben crouched at the cellar door, a kitchen knife gripped in his small hands, his face white but determined. Behind him, Maddie was curled in a corner crying silently. "Is it over?" Ben asked. "Is the bad man gone?" "He's gone." Jacob gathered both boys into his arms. "It's over. You're safe." Clara stood back watching the three of them, her heart so full it hurt. This family, this broken, beautiful, stubborn family, they were hers now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath was chaos. Deputy Crawford arrived with reinforcements just before dawn, too late to help, but in time to clean up. They found 2 of Harrington's men dead in the yard, 1 wounded and surrendering, and Blackwood's body in the kitchen. Of Harrington himself, there was no sign. "He probably ran the moment things went bad," Crawford said, surveying the damage. "Men like him don't stick around for the hard parts." "He'll be back," Jacob said flatly. "He's not the type to give up." "Maybe, but the territorial marshal will be here tomorrow, and I've already wired the authorities in Denver. Whatever connections Harrington has, they won't protect him from a murder charge." Clara hoped he was right, but she'd learned not to trust hope alone. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and recovery. Will's wound had reopened during the fight, and Clara spent hours restitching it while he cursed creatively in Spanish. The boys clung to her, and Jacob like shadows, afraid to let either of them out of sight. On the 3rd day after the attack, a rider appeared on the road. Clara was on the porch with Maddie teaching him to recognize letters in a picture book when she spotted the approaching figure. Her hand went instinctively to the rifle beside her chair. "Ezra," she called. "Someone's coming." But as the rider drew closer, she realized it wasn't a threat. It was a woman, a young woman barely out of her teens with dark hair and frightened eyes. "Please," the woman called out as she reined in her horse. "I'm looking for Jacob McAllister. My name is Mary Wilson. I think you knew my father." Mary Wilson. Pete Wilson's daughter. The one he'd asked Clara to find. Clara set down the picture book and walked to meet her. "Your father," Clara said quietly. "He was the driver of my stagecoach. He died in the crash." Mary's face crumpled. "I know. I got the letter from the sheriff. But I had to come. I had to see where it happened. I had to—" She broke off, struggling for composure. Clara understood. She'd felt the same need after her own parents died. The need to stand in the place where they'd taken their last breath, as if that might bring them closer somehow. "He talked about you at the end," Clara said. "He wanted me to tell you he was sorry. That he thought of you." Mary's tears spilled over. "He wasn't a perfect father. He was gone a lot. But he was mine, you know. He was all I had." Clara helped her dismount and led her inside. Jacob appeared, his expression softening when he saw Mary's grief. "Miss Wilson, I'm sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you." Mary wiped her eyes. "I came to collect his things, if there are any, and to thank Miss Whitmore. The sheriff told me what happened, how she stayed with him, how she survived." "Your father saved my life," Clara said. "He told me how to find this ranch. If not for him, I would have died in that storm." Mary looked around the room at the kitchen where Clara was clearly at home, at Maddie peeking from behind the doorframe, at Jacob standing protectively nearby. "It seems like his directions led you to something good." "They did." Clara glanced at Jacob. "Better than I ever imagined." Mary stayed for 2 days. She and Clara spent hours talking about Pete, about loss, about the strange ways fate moved people from one life to another. Mary was heading to San Antonio to live with an aunt, to start over in a new place. "Like you did," Mary said on the morning she left. "Starting over here?" "I suppose so, though I didn't plan any of this." "Does anyone—" Mary smiled sadly. "My father always said life was what happened while you were busy making other plans. I used to think that was just an excuse for his wandering ways. Now I think maybe he was right." Clara hugged her goodbye and watched her ride away, carrying her father's few possessions and her own uncertain future. That evening, as the sun set and the ranch settled into its evening rhythms, Jacob found Clara sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. Thinking about Mary. Thinking about everything. Clara shifted to make room for him beside her. "A month ago I was on that stagecoach running from my past with no idea where I was going. Now I'm here, with you, with the boys. It feels like a dream sometimes." "Not a dream." Jacob took her hand. "Real as anything. Harrington's still out there. The marshal will find him. And if he doesn't, if Harrington comes back—" Jacob was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll face him. Together. Like we faced everything else." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this. A home. A family. Love." "Neither did I." Jacob's arm came around her. "After Hannah died, I closed that door, locked it tight, told myself I'd never open it again." "What changed?" "You showed up half dead on my doorstep and refused to give up." Jacob's voice was soft. "You fought to survive when most people would have surrendered. You took on my wounded foreman, my grieving sons, my stubborn self, and you never once backed down. How could I not fall in love with someone like that?" Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Jacob, let me finish. I've been thinking about the wedding. About doing it right this time with a real ceremony. Real vows, the whole town watching. We don't need all of that." "No, but I want it. I want everyone to see that you're mine and I'm yours. I want the boys to have that memory of seeing their father marry the woman who saved us all." Jacob turned to face her. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me properly this time with a dress and flowers and a celebration?"
Clara laughed through her tears. You already asked me. I already said yes. I'm asking again. I'll ask every day if I have to. Yes. Clara kissed him softly. Yes, 1,000 times yes. From inside the house came Maddie's excited voice. Ben, they're kissing again. That means we're definitely getting a mama right. Ben's reply was quieter, but Clara heard the warmth in it. Yeah, Maddie, I think we definitely are. Jacob chuckled against her lips. No privacy in this house? Would you want it any other way? Not for anything in the world. They sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out, planning a future neither of them had dared to hope for. The ranch was safe. The family was whole. And somewhere out there, justice was hunting Nathaniel Harrington with the patient inevitability of winter turning to spring. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely offered those. But it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were better than endings anyway. The wedding was set for the following Sunday. Clara spent the week in a happy chaos of preparation. Mrs. Prescott took charge of the arrangements with the efficiency of a general planning a campaign. The ladies' auxiliary descended on the ranch with fabric and flowers, transforming the house into something almost elegant. You'll wear white, Mrs. Prescott declared, holding up a length of ivory silk she'd somehow procured. Hannah would have wanted that. Clara touched the fabric, remembering the woman whose place she was taking. Are you sure it seems presumptuous? Hannah McAllister was my friend. I knew her heart better than most. She would have wanted those boys to have a mother who loved them. She would have wanted Jacob to find happiness again. Mrs. Prescott's voice softened. And she would have been proud to know her dresses helped you survive, until you could stand on your own. Clara blinked back tears. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott. Margaret, if you're going to be one of us, you might as well use my name. The dress came together beautifully, a simple design that suited Clara's practical nature while still managing to be elegant. The boys were measured for new shirts, much to Maddie's delight, and Ben's grumbling acceptance. I look ridiculous, Ben complained, tugging at his collar. You look handsome, Clara corrected, like a young gentleman. I don't want to be a gentleman. I want to be a rancher like Papa. You can be both. The best ranchers know when to clean up and when to get dirty. Ben considered this, then nodded reluctantly. I guess that makes sense. The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in Hannah's room, her room now watching the moonlight silver the fields. Tomorrow she would stand before God and this community and pledge herself to Jacob McAllister. Tomorrow she would become a wife and mother, in truth not just an arrangement. A soft knock at her door made her turn. Come in. Ben slipped inside, looking younger than his 9 years in his nightshirt. Can't sleep either, Clara asked. I had a dream. About Mama. Ben moved to stand beside her at the window. She was here in this room. She was smiling. What did she say? She said she was glad you came. That she'd been waiting for someone to take care of us. And now she could rest. Ben's voice wavered. Do you think that's real, or just a dream? Clara considered carefully. I think sometimes our hearts tell us things our minds can't understand, and I think your mother loved you so much that even death couldn't stop her from wanting you to be happy. So it was real. It was real to you. That's what matters. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then in a rush, I'm glad you're marrying Papa. I didn't want to be glad at first, but I am. And I'm sorry I was mean to you in the beginning. You weren't mean. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference. You always say things like that. Things that make me feel better about being scared. Clara opened her arms, and Ben stepped into her embrace. He was small and warm, his heart beating fast against her chest. I'm going to love you like my own son, she whispered. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Is that okay? Ben nodded against her shoulder. It's okay. Good. Now go back to bed. Tomorrow's a big day. After he left, Clara returned to the window. The moon had risen higher, casting long shadows across the land that would soon be her home in every legal sense. She thought about the journey that had brought her here,
The losses. The pain. The long nights of wondering if she would ever belong anywhere again. And she thought about what waited on the other side of tomorrow. A husband who loved her. Children who needed her. A community that had accepted her. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better. Clara climbed into bed, and for the first time in years, fell asleep with a smile on her face. She woke to Maddie's voice screaming her name. "Clara! Clara, wake up! There's a fire! The barn's on fire!" Clara threw off the covers and ran to the window. Flames licked at the barn roof orange and hungry against the pre-dawn darkness. Men were shouting, running, organizing bucket brigades. She pulled on her dress and ran downstairs. Jacob met her at the door, his face grim. "It's Harrington," he said. "Has to be. He waited until we let our guard down." The boys. Safe with Ezra in the cellar. But Clara, the horses. The horses. The livelihood of the ranch. The animals that made everything else possible. Clara didn't think. She just ran. "Clara!" Jacob's voice behind her, but she was already sprinting toward the barn. The heat hit her like a wall. Smoke stung her eyes, filled her lungs. She could hear the horses screaming, trapped in their stalls, panicking. She grabbed a blanket from outside the barn, soaked it in the water trough, and wrapped it around her head. Then she plunged into the inferno. The first stall held a mare she'd come to know, gentle creature good with the boys. Clara fumbled with the latch, her fingers clumsy from fear. The mare reared, nearly striking her. "Easy, girl. Easy. Come on." She got the stall open, slapped the mare's flank, sent her running toward the open door. Then the next stall, and the next. The smoke was getting thicker. Clara could barely see, could barely breathe. Her lungs burned. Her skin felt like it was blistering. One more stall. One more horse. She could do this. The latch stuck. Clara pulled, twisted, slammed her palm against it. Nothing. "Come on! Come on!" A beam cracked overhead. Clara looked up and saw death coming for her, flaming and final. Then arms grabbed her, pulled her backward. She fell against a solid chest, felt herself being dragged toward the door as the beam crashed down where she'd been standing. "I've got you," Jacob's voice in her ear. "Hold on. I've got you." They burst out of the barn together, stumbling, coughing, alive. The ranch hands caught them, pulled them away, as the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Clara fell to her knees, gasping for air. Jacob collapsed beside her. "You fool," he said, his voice raw from smoke. "You beautiful, brave, reckless fool. The horses. All out. Every single one. Because of you." Clara looked at the burning barn, at the horses milling in the paddock, at the faces of the ranch hands, who were staring at her with something like awe. "She saved them," Will said, his voice carrying across the chaos. "Every last one." But Clara wasn't looking at the barn anymore. She was looking at the figure standing at the edge of the firelight. Nathaniel Harrington. He held a rifle, and it was pointed directly at Jacob. Clara's heart stopped. Harrington stood 20 feet away, his expensive clothes ruined by soot and sweat, his face twisted with a rage that had consumed everything human in him. The firelight from the burning barn cast dancing shadows across his features, making him look like something from a nightmare. "Nobody move," Harrington ordered. His voice was steady, but Clara could see his hands trembling. "I've got nothing left to lose. You made sure of that." Jacob slowly raised his hands. "Harrington, put the gun down. This is over." Over. Harrington laughed a broken sound. "The marshal seized my accounts. My investors pulled out. My reputation is destroyed. All because one stubborn rancher wouldn't sell his worthless dirt." His finger tightened on the trigger. "If I'm going to hang for Blackwood's crimes, I might as well earn it." Clara's mind raced. The ranch hands were frozen too far away to help. Will was somewhere in the darkness, but she couldn't see him. Ezra was with the boys in the cellar. She was the closest person to Harrington, the only one who might be able to do something. "You don't want to do this," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Harrington's eyes flicked to her. Don't I? If you kill Jacob, you'll never get off this property alive. His men will gun you down. And then what? Your name becomes a curse. Your family's legacy ends with a murderer. I don't have any family. Then you have nothing to lose by letting him live. Walk away. Disappear. Start over somewhere else. I had a fortune. I had power. I had everything. Harrington's voice cracked. And you people took it all from me. You took it from yourself, Clara said. The moment you decided that money mattered more than people's lives. The moment you sent men to steal and kill and intimidate. You did this, Harrington, not us. Shut up. You're a coward, a bully, a man so small that he had to destroy others to feel big. I said shut up. The gun swung toward Clara. She heard Jacob shout her name, heard movement in the darkness, but her eyes stayed locked on Harrington. Go ahead, she said quietly. Pull the trigger. Prove me right. Harrington's finger twitched. Clara braced herself for the impact. The shot rang out deafening in the darkness. Clara waited for pain, for death, for the ending she'd somehow always known was coming. But the pain didn't come. Harrington crumpled his rifle, falling from nerveless fingers. Behind him, barely visible in the firelight, stood Ben. 9-year-old Ben, with his father's old hunting rifle and eyes that held the weight of what he'd just done. Ben. Clara's voice came out as a whisper. The boy didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring at the man he'd shot. Jacob reached his son first, gathering him into his arms, blocking his view of Harrington's body. It's okay. You did what you had to do. It's okay. I killed him. Ben's voice was small lost. Papa, I killed him. You saved Clara. You saved all of us. Jacob held his son tight. That's not murder, Ben. That's protection. That's love. Clara stumbled toward them, her legs barely holding her. She fell to her knees beside Jacob, and Ben wrapping her arms around them both. You were so brave, she whispered to Ben. So incredibly brave. You said I was supposed to protect the people I love. Ben's voice was muffled against his father's chest. I couldn't let him hurt you. I couldn't. You didn't. Clara pulled back, cupping Ben's face in her hands. You saved me. Do you understand? You saved my life. Ben's eyes filled with tears, the first real tears she'd seen from him since she arrived. I was so scared. I heard the shots and smelled the fire. And Ezra said to stay in the cellar, but I couldn't. I had to help. You did help. More than you know. Will appeared out of the darkness, checked Harrington's body, and shook his head. He's gone. Clara felt nothing. No satisfaction. No grief. Just a hollow relief that it was over. Someone needs to ride to town. Jacob said, his voice rough. Get the marshal. Tell him what happened. I'll go. Will glanced at Clara. You should get the boys inside, out of this mess. Clara nodded. She took Ben's hand, he gripped it like a lifeline and led him toward the house. Behind them, the barn continued to burn, but Clara didn't look back. She couldn't. Maddie met them at the door, Ezra hovering behind him. The younger boy's face was streaked with tears, his small body shaking. Is Ben okay? I heard a gun. Is everyone okay? Everyone's okay. Clara knelt down and opened her arms. Maddie flew into them. We're all okay. It's over. Promise. I promise. She held both boys close, feeling their hearts beat against her own. Behind her, she heard Jacob's footsteps, felt his hand come to rest on her shoulder. Let's get inside, he said quietly. We've had enough of the dark for one night. The marshal arrived at dawn with a full complement of deputies. They took statements, examined Harrington's body, and declared Ben's actions justified self-defense of another. The boy wouldn't face charges. Clara sat with Ben through all of it, holding his hand while he answered questions in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. She watched him try to be strong, try to carry this new weight the way he'd carried so many others. When the marshal finally left, Ben looked at Clara with eyes that seemed a decade older than yesterday. Am I going to have nightmares? Maybe, probably. Clara didn't believe in lying to children. But nightmares can be survived, and you won't have to survive them alone. You'll be there. Every single night, for as long as you need me. Ben nodded slowly. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. I'm glad you're going to be my mother. Clara pulled him into a hug and let her tears fall freely. The wedding was postponed. Nobody questioned the decision. A man had died on the property. A child had been forced to take a life. The burned shell of the barn stood as a constant reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. But life on a ranch didn't stop for grief or recovery. There were cattle to tend, fences to mend, a new barn to build. Clara threw herself into the work alongside the men, her hands blistering as she hauled lumber and hammered nails. You don't have to do this, Jacob told her on the third day. This is ranch work, man's work. Show me in the Bible where it says women can't swing a hammer. Jacob laughed, a real laugh, the first since the fire. Fair point. They worked side by side, not talking much, just existing in each other's presence. Clara found comfort in the physical labor, in the way it exhausted her body enough that her mind couldn't dwell on darker things. Ben joined them when he could, carrying water and sorting nails. He was quieter than before, more watchful, but Clara caught glimpses of the boy he'd been. A smile when Maddie said something silly. A spark of interest when the ranch hands told stories around the evening fire. He was healing, slowly, but healing. 2 weeks after the fire, Mrs. Prescott arrived with a wagon full of supplies and a determined expression. Enough mourning, she announced, marching into the kitchen where Clara was making bread. That man wasn't worth a single tear, and I won't have you letting his memory ruin what should be a celebration. Margaret, don't Margaret me. The new barn's almost finished. The boys need something happy to look forward to, and this town needs to see that the McAllisters can't be broken. Mrs. Prescott set her hands on her hips. The wedding is happening this Sunday, and I'll hear no arguments. Clara looked at the older woman, this fierce, impossible woman, who'd become something like a friend, and felt a smile tugging at her lips. You're very bossy. Someone has to be. Lord knows you and Jacob would spend the rest of your lives giving it time, if left to your own devices. Mrs. Prescott's expression softened. Clara, that boy needs to see good things happen. He needs to know that love can come after loss. The best thing you can do for Ben is marry his father with joy, not sorrow. Clara thought about it. Thought about Ben's haunted eyes, Maddie's desperate need for stability, Jacob's quiet grief that never quite went away. You're right. Of course I am. Now where did we put that silk? The preparations began again, but differently this time. Quieter, more intentional. Clara involved the boys in every decision, from the flowers to the food to the music. She wanted them to feel like participants, not spectators. The night before the wedding, she found Ben sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? She asked, settling beside him. Thinking. About what? About tomorrow. About Mama. About... He stopped, struggling for words. Clara waited. Is it wrong? Ben finally asked. Being happy after everything. Clara considered the question seriously. No, it's not wrong. It's necessary. But people died. Harrington died because of me. Harrington died because of choices he made. You were just the end of a road he started down years ago. Clara turned to face him fully. Ben carrying guilt for things you couldn't control, that's not honor. It's prison. Your mother wouldn't want that for you. Your father doesn't want that. And I don't want it either. How do you stop feeling guilty, I mean? You don't stop. You just learn to carry it differently. You make room for other feelings too. Happiness, love, hope. The guilt doesn't go away, but it stops being the only thing. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then, will you teach me how to carry it? Every day, for as long as it takes. That could be forever. Then forever. Clara put her arm around him. I'm not going anywhere, Ben. Not ever. That's what family means. Ben leaned against her shoulder, and they sat together, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to Maddie bouncing on her bed, his face shining with excitement. It's the day! It's the day! You're getting married today! Clara laughed and pulled him into a hug. I noticed. Ben says I get to carry the rings. Mrs. Prescott gave me a special pillow and everything. And Ezra made a cake this big. Maddie spread his arms as wide as they could go. And there's going to be music and dancing and... Breathe, Maddie. The boy gulped air. I'm just so happy. Are you happy, Clara? You have to be happy on your wedding day. That's the rules. Clara looked at this child who had welcomed her from the very beginning, who had never asked her to prove herself, who had simply opened his heart and let her in. I'm very happy, she said. Happier than I've ever been. The dress fit perfectly. Mrs. Prescott had made last-minute adjustments, adding tiny seed pearls along the collar that caught the light when Clara moved. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers that Ben had picked that morning, a gesture that had nearly made her cry. You look beautiful. Jacob's voice came from the doorway. Clara turned. He stood there in his best suit, his dark hair combed back, his eyes bright with emotion. He looked handsome and nervous and utterly dear to her. You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. I never was much for rules. Jacob stepped closer. Clara, before we do this, I need to say something. Jacob, please, let me. He took her hands in his. When Hannah died, I thought my heart died with her. I spent 3 years going through the motions of living, but I wasn't really here. Not for the boys, not for the ranch, not for anything. Clara felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Then you showed up half frozen and fighting for your life, and something in me woke up. I fought it at first. Told myself it was just gratitude or convenience, or anything other than what it really was. What was it really? Love. Jacob's voice cracked. Real love. The kind that terrifies you because you know what it means to lose it. I love you, Clara Whitmore, not as a replacement for Hannah, not as a solution to my problems, but as you. Just you. Clara couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't care. I love you too, she whispered. I think I've loved you since you carried me out of that blizzard. I just didn't know what to call it. Jacob pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Ready to do this. I've been ready since the day you asked me to stay. The ceremony was held outside under the oak tree where Hannah was buried. It had been Clara's idea, a way of including the woman who had come before, of honoring her memory rather than erasing it. The whole town had turned out. Mrs. Prescott sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Will stood beside Jacob as his best man, his wounded arm still in a sling, but his smile genuine. Ezra played a gentle melody on his fiddle as Clara walked toward her future. Ben and Maddie stood beside their father, both looking older than their years in their new clothes. When Clara reached them, Maddie grabbed her hand and whispered loudly, You're so pretty, Clara, like a princess. Thank you, sweetheart. Reverend Stone cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jacob Samuel McAllister and Clara Josephine Whitmore in holy matrimony. Clara barely heard the familiar words. She was too focused on Jacob's face, on the love she saw there, on the future, spreading out before them like an unexplored country. Clara. Reverend Stone said, Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part. Clara thought of everything that had brought her to this moment. The loss, the pain, the long journey through darkness to this sunlit clearing. I do. And do you, Jacob, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Jacob's eyes never left Clara's face. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Stone smiled. Jacob, you may kiss your bride. Jacob pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her with all the love and hope and promise of years to come. Around them, the crowd erupted in cheers. Maddie whooped and threw his arms around both of them. Ben hung back for a moment, then stepped forward and joined the embrace. We're a family now, Maddie announced to anyone who would listen. A real family. Forever and ever. Forever and ever. Clara agreed, her voice thick with happy tears. The celebration lasted until well past sunset. There was food and music and dancing laughter and stories and the kind of joy that came from community coming together to witness something good. Clara danced with Jacob until her feet ached. She danced with Will, who stepped on her toes twice and apologized profusely. She danced with Ezra, who surprised everyone with moves he claimed to have learned in New Orleans 40 years ago. And she danced with Ben. I'm not very good at this, he warned, stepping on her hem. Neither am I. But that's okay. Dancing isn't about being good. It's about being together. Ben considered this. I like that. Me too. They shuffled around the makeshift dance floor, bumping into other couples and laughing at their own clumsiness. For a few minutes, Ben was just a boy at a party, not a child carrying the weight of trauma and loss. Clara held on to that moment, tucked it away in her heart, where she kept all her precious things. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Mrs. Prescott approached with her usual brisk efficiency. Well, Mrs. McAllister, how does it feel? Mrs. McAllister. Clara let the name settle over her like a warm blanket. It feels right. Good. Because this community is going to need you. We've already discussed making you the official medical person for the area since Doc Miller is getting too old to ride out to the far ranches. And the Ladies' Auxiliary has voted unanimously to put you in charge of the new school we're planning to build. Margaret, I just got married 5 minutes ago. And time waits for no one, Clara. You've got skills this community needs. We're not going to let them go to waste. Mrs. Prescott's stern expression softened. But that can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, enjoy your wedding. You've earned it. Clara watched the older woman walk away and felt a warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't just gaining a husband and children today. She was gaining a place, a purpose, a community that wanted her, that valued what she could offer. It was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. Jacob came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. How strange life is. Strange how? A month ago, I was on a stagecoach running from my past. I had no home, no family, no future. I thought my story was over. Clara leaned back against his chest. And now look at me, a wife, a mother, part of a community. It doesn't seem real. It's real. Jacob pressed a kiss to her temple. Every bit of it. How do you know? Because I can feel your heart beating. Because I can see our boys over there fighting over who gets the last piece of cake. Because this land under my feet is solid and true, and so is what we've built together. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I love you, Jacob McAllister. I love you too, Clara McAllister. She kissed him again, softer this time, with the knowledge that they had a lifetime ahead for harder kisses. This one was just about gratitude. About the miracle of finding each other in a vast and lonely world. Mama, Papa. Maddie's voice cut through the moment. Ben says I can't have any more cake, but I want more cake. Clara and Jacob exchanged a look that combined exasperation and amusement. "Welcome to parenthood," Jacob murmured. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They walked hand in hand toward their squabbling sons, toward the messy, beautiful reality of family life. Behind them, the oak tree stood sentinel over Hannah's grave, and Clara could almost imagine the ghost of a woman she'd never met watching with approval as her family moved forward into the light. That night, after the guests had gone and the boys were tucked into bed, Clara stood at the window of the master bedroom, her room now shared with her husband, and looked out at the land that had become her home. The new barn rose solid and strong against the starlit sky. The cattle grazed peacefully in distant pastures. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called, and another answered. It was beautiful. It was wild. It was hers. Jacob came to stand beside her, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "What are you looking at?" "Our future." "And what does it look like?" Clara thought about it. She thought about mornings filled with children's laughter and evenings filled with quiet conversation. She thought about seasons changing and years passing and roots growing ever deeper into this land. She thought about challenges to come. There would always be challenges, and the certainty that they would face them together. "It looks like everything I ever wanted," she said finally, "even though I didn't know I wanted it until I found it." "That's the funny thing about life," Jacob said. "Sometimes the best destinations are the ones we never planned to reach." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the Texas wind whispered across the plains, carrying the promise of winter storms and spring thaws and summers full of growth. Inside, warmth held steady against the darkness. She had come here running from loss, seeking only survival. She had found love in the arms of a grieving widower, purpose in the needs of two motherless boys, belonging in the embrace of a community that had chosen to accept her. She had found home. The next morning, Clara woke to Maddie's voice demanding pancakes, Ben's grumbling response, and Jacob's rumbling laugh. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of her family, feeling the solid warmth of the house around her. Then she rose, pulled on her robe, and went downstairs to start the day. There were pancakes to make, children to teach, a husband to love, a life to build. And Clara Whitmore McAllister, once a homeless schoolteacher running from her past, walked into that life with her head held high and her heart wide open. Because sometimes the worst endings lead to the best beginnings. Sometimes loss carves out space for new love to grow. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to keep walking through the storm, you find a family waiting on the other side. Clara had walked through her storm. She had survived. She had triumphed. And now, finally, she was home.